Okay, Ruth just texted back. So, but we can get started. So I'm hoping, before we start with the letter, I did just want to say that Darren sent an email today about, his next NASB. Typing really loudly. Ruth, can you mute yourself?
Sorry, that was actually me.
I don't think that's me.
Oh my gosh.
Yes, happily.
Sorry, Ruth. I just saw you were unmuted and it looked like you were typing. So, yes, Darren has his next NASB, what's it called? Not well-rounded, but whole child study group next week. And, we are really lucky to have him and that study group as a resource. So I haven't really had a chance to look carefully at what he sent us this morning and dig into all of those links, but I just want to put it out there that that's, a resource that we should be using for this committee, and that, if we have specific questions that we want to ask of that study group, that he can be our messenger for that. So if there are things that come up during this meeting today that would make sense to like get a broader perspective on, like understanding what other states are doing at this moment around meeting the needs of the whole child, or anything else, even if it's more specific, that would make sense to ask a bigger group, let's just kind of keep that in mind. So just putting that out there to start. Okay, so I wanted to do two things with the letter that I sent. One is really first for us as a committee to talk about it, and I think the first thing to do is for us to all get on the same page about what it is we are doing before we send it to the whole board. So I just wanted to give you the opportunity now to give feedback on it. What stands out to you as, yes, this is what we decided we were going to do. Is there anything that you have questions about, concerns about? So I open it up.
I'll say I thought it was great, actually. I thought it was really focused and really had come together around this idea of the public-facing webinars, like the topics. So I feel very good about it, actually. I think you've really pulled together a pretty good agenda.
Okay, great.
And it started much bigger and a little, not so clear, but I think this has come together really nicely.
Thank you, Ruth. Do other folks, so, I mean, maybe this is easy, this part, just generally, can we just say we get a thumbs up on this as a plan? Okay, Marcus? Marcus gave us thumbs up, I could see. No, I'm just kidding. We'll wait for Marcus. Okay. All right, so moving on then. And in terms, I guess, then of sending this letter to our colleagues, is there anything that's missing? Is there anything that could be better? I mean, maybe that's not something you need to answer now, but I'm planning to send it, say, on Monday. And so if you have any comments or if there are typos or anything like that, just send those along. I won't make you work on it over the weekend. Sorry. Let's do it by Wednesday. So if you could get them to me by Wednesday morning, that would be great. Okay. So then getting into sort of more specifics. I'm looking at the wrong thing. Sorry. Zach and I and Darren have been talking about what to do first. And I don't know if you had a chance to look at the survey of the surveys that Darren pulled together, which is really interesting and helpful. But we based at least some of our, what we suggested in terms of topics on that. And then Zach and I also talked about just what we're hearing in our wards. And so we are suggesting that we start with parent engagement as our first one, but honestly, I think it could just as easily be tech issues. I think the three main things that really stand out to me right now are family engagement, tech, and actually learning hubs. But we thought that starting with family engagement made the most sense because it is, first of all, one of the most basic issues right now. When I did, I think I talked about this at the last meeting, that I did a sort of focus group with teachers at the Project Zero conference. And that's what they brought up, was just, that was from the spring though. They talked mostly about how important it was to connect with parents, and that if they couldn't do that, it was sort of a non-starter. Everything else was a non-starter, right? So even teachers being able to provide tech support or understanding what parents needed, they first needed to have that communication with families. And so they gave really good advice about how they, just like what they came to understand was necessary to make contact with the hardest to reach families. And what they found was, it wasn't through tech, it was through old-fashioned methods, like calling people on the phone, starting, in the beginning every day, and then, once a week, and then just having those kinds of check-ins, and then making sure that families were able to get online so that they could then have the face-to-face meetings, and making sure that families had like paper or, hard copies of the things they needed, because they didn't have dependable Wi-Fi. So all of these things were really useful, and it just made me realize that, the people who are doing this are the ones that actually we need to hear from, and that there's, possible, or we know that there's been a disconnect, right? So that this is a place where we really could add value. So that's the rationale for starting with parent engagement. I think the question for us is, how do we target this? Is it targeted at parents? Like, is the target audience parents, right? So that would really influence who we invite. Or is the target audience educators, right? Or can we do both? I'm not sure. And that's kind of where we are right now. Zach and Darren and I are like trying to figure out who would we invite, and who are we trying to inform? So thoughts on that, both the topic, I guess, and also, so first, actually, let's talk about the topic. Does starting with parent engagement make sense to folks?
I'll jump in. I think starting with parent engagement makes very good sense, because I think it, especially in this moment of distance learning, we're seeing that some of the families that didn't know that there was a survey, some of the families that didn't know how many logins their students would have. I saw something this morning, a school posted some tips for parents online. It's posted on Twitter, but they include like, you should be in the room with your child when they're on a live session. Like, I'm sure that's hard for families that don't have that time or flexibility to do that. So a lot of that is preceded by the need for schools to clearly communicate to parents what is expected and what supports are available. So I think parent engagement for me precedes some of the troubles with tech and distance learning, and seems to me then a good place for us to start.
Yeah. Any other thoughts on that? Thanks, Jessica.
The one thing I agree with that. The other one that I think is important, so maybe think of it for two, is the learning hubs, which is so current. so specific, it's so current, there's room for recommendations. And I think people are both desperate and curious. It's like we have all these buildings, we have all these parks and all these kids who need care, and why aren't we doing something? So
Yeah,
I suggest that as a second.
I agree. I'm almost wondering if there could be an element of that in the parent engagement one, you
I
know,
think that's
and
a good idea.
yeah, because obviously they're very related. And I think, you know, what we've all been hearing from families sort of across the socioeconomic spectrum is that this is such a strain for families who need to work, right? And most families need to work. Um, and also for families with young children. So I think it's very related. So maybe that is sort of a combined. We could also do one focused on hubs, and because hubs encompasses different formats, and we couldn't really get at that, I don't think, if the focus is parent engagement, but I think it could be a part of it, and we can invite somebody to talk about. And you know, one of the upsides of the distance or the virtual format is we could invite somebody from Baltimore, for instance, or, you know, where they're actually doing this. And they could help us understand, how are you doing it safely? I think the big question right now is, how do you do it so that it's not siphoning kids away from their synchronous time? Even the youngest kids, apparently that's a concern. They don't, you know, they're supposed to be present, and that's what attendance is based on. And so this was a conversation I actually had with the DME, that, you know, he believes that we should be having learning hubs, but can't support, or he said he can't support doing it during regular class time right now. And I think for the youngest students, that's hard. It's a challenge. And I know that parents are really feeling it. So I am very curious to know how other cities are doing that piece in particular. Yeah, Jessica.
I do think it would be helpful to have someone from a city that's doing this talk about it, because I've also heard this from Deputy Mayor Kine, and it's a thing I don't get, because the point of the hub is a place where you are attending your synchronous classes and there are
Right.
grown-ups there to help you. It's essentially your classroom when you can't go to your classroom. And if I'm going to Kip Will, and the other kid who's in that hub is going to Friendship Armstrong, and the other kid in that hub goes to Garrison Elementary, it doesn't matter. We're all doing our synchronous lessons, and there's just someone who's keeping an eye on us, making sure we got logged in okay, ready to be there if we raise our hand. I get the sense that's what's happening in San Francisco and in Baltimore, where they're doing these things. That it's a place kids are going to physically be supervised, but not doing other learning. And I'll say, for the private providers that are doing these pods, I sat in on a bunch of their info sessions with parents, and they were explicit. We are not teaching your children content. We are facilitating their online learning. And so I don't know where the fear comes from that, like, someone would try and do something else with kids when they were supposed to be in school, rather than, no, the point is someone needs to help the kids be in school when school is as complicated as it is right now.
Yeah.
And also I would
Yes,
say, we've also got to force them to think about this beyond the current emergency. I mean, the chancellor said last night in Ward 7 that, you know, the system is going to provide, you know, virtual settings for students to learn for the foreseeable future. And so even as we begin to come out of the emergency and more families begin to return back to work, I think we've got to, you know, think about it as something that might not last just to the, you know, end of this period or the end of, you know, the semester, but may, you know, last school years, and how the city, what responsibility the city has to facilitate that, to make all families feel safe and make sure all students are connected, is something that they've got to do. So, you know, I think, you know, we should think about it as also reimagining what public education looks like, you know, beyond the emergency.
That's a great point, Marcus. Thank you. Yeah, no, I think that's all right. And I guess Jessica, you're making me realize that I'm maybe forgetting a piece of this, which is, you're right. The hubs are about, having safe spaces for kids where there are adults that can facilitate the online learning. And then there's also the argument that I'm hearing from folks about how for young children, they should be doing more experiential learning, and that their families, that they should have more outdoor time and all of those things. And so I think that's where the conflict comes in. And so maybe it's a different issue actually than the learning hubs question. Yeah.
So it's interesting because I'm not sure it is, but here's how I guess I would describe it. I think we're all in a period of time where it's hard to get out of our head about what school is and understand what school has become. And so for preschool, I'll use that as an example. Like for a hub that served preschool kids, it would still involve facilitating whatever online process their school was using, and it would facilitate whatever not online stuff their school was encouraging. So there, it might make sense to say for early childhood, we want to do hubs that are LEA specific. So we want to try to get DCPS pre-K kids together so that they're doing a common curriculum. We want to get KIPP pre-K kids with KIPP pre-K kids, because if one of the things their LEA is saying is we have, a science unit on planting seeds, then that's also something the hub would facilitate. Is like the school's still providing the lesson, but someone's going to actually have the dirt and the cups and help the kids put the dirt in the cups. I think it's still the difference between there are trained educators who prepared lessons and have done what they can to give the advice to the adult responsible for helping the kid implement. But now you got to have an adult who helps the kid implement. And for some families during the workday, that just can't be them because they're nurses or doctors or healthcare providers or grocery store workers or whatever. And we've got to find a place for that to happen. So I hear what you're saying, Emily, but I think for me, it's the conflict that I'm hearing from folks like Deputy Mayor Kine and the Chancellor. I don't know why it's an excuse, but it's just an excuse. Like, we're not trying to take away from your opportunity to teach the kids. We're trying to make it happen.
Right. I think what they're doing is, I don't know if you all saw this memo that came out, that it was from DCPS, and it was sort of like an announcement that there's going to be a RFP for providers. Did you see that, Jessica? That for providers to actually provide hubs, like you're explaining. And it's sort of their workaround, I think, because they don't want to, they can't really do it under the current circumstances, but this is something that they want. Yeah. So I think they want it to happen. They've kind of tied themselves up. I don't know. I don't know exactly what it is, but therefore I think it's very pertinent right now. So I think we're in agreement on that maybe the first one is focused on parent engagement with an element focused on hubs. Yeah. Okay. If there's
I'm just going to say one last thing on this, Emily. I think on that element of hubs, my hope is specifically that we would try to make simple that which the rest of the folks in our ed landscape have made real complicated.
Agreed.
Right. To try to make it as plain as possible that like the purpose of these is safe places for kids to do learning their schools have provided, and try to keep it as simple as that. And whatever ideas we may have for implementation, we can throw that in there. But I think our value add could be being clear and concise in a way that others are not.
That's funny.
Are you laughing because we are not all often clear and concise?
No, it's the opposite. I just think that's funny that is, I think it's ironic. That's all, that is true, that is needed. And
sometimes it's not that complicated.
Or it's so obvious. It's like, yeah, there's logistics to work out, but let's do that. Like, let's work out those logistics. So good. I think this sounds smart. And so let me just see if I had any other things for this part.
So one thing I'll throw in here, we were talking about it yesterday. It's just an engagement strategy. It may be worth us thinking about, like, how are we going to do parent engagement beyond just surveys, which is only going to reach just a subset of parents. And I don't know if we want to do that in this meeting, but it would be helpful to come up with a strategy. So we're hearing from a wide swath of parents throughout the city.
Yeah, so
Yeah.
that was actually one of the what we can move on to. It's a good segue. Thank you, Zach. So I divided sort of the next part into two areas, which one is content. So what should the content be? And I think this goes back to the question of who's the target. Is it educators or is it parents, or can it be both? And it's hard to think about what we're going to, or what the content is, without clarifying that, I think. Or maybe, I guess it could go either way. So maybe we should just talk a little bit about what is needed in terms of content, as Zach suggests. Like, I'm sorry, I am not being clear right now, or simple. Yeah, what is parent engagement? I guess that is the question, is, do we want to help inform what schools are doing and what teachers are doing? And or do we want to help parents be more engaged and understand how to be more engaged? Is it possible to do both of those in one webinar? Or do we need to focus on one? And I don't think I have really worked that out in my mind yet. What I start doing, and I think that was in the letter I sent you, was listing possible participants on a panel. And I think it might make sense, to invite like 4 or 5 panelists, but also invite other folks in the field to be present, to be part of the conversation. But I didn't include in that list parents. So that is a thought too, is to include parents, especially if they're parents who straddle both, which is an easy thing to do, right? Like, there are lots of us who are both parents and folks who specialize in parent engagement. So what do you think is most needed, I guess, is my question.
Okay, I'm going to get off for about 15 minutes. So let me just quickly say to your earliest question, I think it is possible to do both. What are ideas for school and teacher engagement and parent engagement, because they're just two sides of the same coin. So I don't see that as a concern. And then the only last thing I'd say, just a thought, is that yes, it is very interesting and useful to get the views of parents who are also educators, but that's not the same parents who are just parents. And it may be also to get parents from the C4DC PAVE who really are sort of parents. That's my 2 cents for now, and I will return.
Thank you.
Or actually, I think I'm just going to go dark. I don't know what I'm going to do, but we'll see.
Other thoughts about that? Or about what's needed right now? What should, looking at the list of possible participants, does that seem like it makes sense to have those folks and what they would bring to this conversation? And that's at the bottom of the letter that I sent.
Emily, I don't know if I'm looking at the wrong thing. I'm looking at the bottom of the letter you sent, and I see.
Might not be there, actually.
I see objectives and possible topics.
Okay, I think it's in a different document then. Let me
Okay.
actually put that in the chat. Sorry.
No, that's okay. I just wanted to make sure because I thought maybe I'm not finding it because I'm multitasking.
No, I think I didn't include it, actually, now that I'm thinking about it. So here you go.
Okay. And then I'll apologize. I missed part of what Ruth was saying. She said something about the PAVE and some other group of parents who, and I didn't really catch, she said who are really parents, and I didn't know what that meant.
What she was just saying is, because I had said, you know, oops, did that get in there? Yes. Okay. Sorry, I wasn't reading
got
this.
it. Okay, cool.
Ruth was saying that there's value in hearing from parents who are not also educators or professionals in the field, right? That they're just parents. And she said, for instance, like the PAVE, whatever they're called, like community leaders or the you know, PAVE advocates who are just parents. Or, you know, PTO folks or, yeah. So I did not include them in my list, but probably we should. But so the thinking here was Zach and I were just noting that we have been hearing from families at schools that, you know, from certain schools that are just doing a really great job communicating. And we thought it would be useful to hear from whoever it is that's helping that happen at those schools. So, you know, that would involve reaching out to, you know, the principals and just asking, what are you doing to make this happen? Can you send you know, like person or the team who is responsible for your family engagement? So these are the schools, and Yu Ying I added just as a parent. So
I've had my elementary in Ward 6.
Minor?
I
Okay.
just went to their community schools visit, and Ms. Woodson, who is their community schools rep in the building.
Mm-hmm.
I was floored by how much is happening at Minor and how much Ms. Woodson is really driving that. And Principal Jackson was on the call, basically being like, "Yeah, this is all Miss Woodson. This is all Miss Woodson." She's on their leadership team at the school, as well as she sits on PTO. She joins the Kindred meetings. She really is like the epitome of what a community schools coordinator is supposed to be. So Minor seems to be doing some pretty great things with their families as well. And I'd love to see if we could get Miss Woodson to speak, because she also did that entire community schools visit with 2 children, basically being kids the entire time. Like there was one on her hip for a while. There was one that kept running across the screen and she never missed a beat. So Ms. Woodson's kind of a rock star.
So Ms. Woodson's the principal, or she's the community schools
She's the community schools coordinator.
Okay, great.
But she's
that's a good
building full time.
Right. No, that's a great to include community.
Yes to community schools. I also don't think I'm backing up too much, but I think you were asking what should be the focus of our conversations. I do think for sure we need to center those schools and folks in those schools who are coordinating this work really well. I do want to say, and I think I'm agreeing with, I think Ruth said this earlier too, is that I think we should do both. I think we should highlight where it's happening very well in the system, but also empower the voices of parents who are just figuring this out, and I think can be a really important voice for parents who, quite frankly, through this entire process are also going to have to advocate for themselves in really real ways, right? No matter how good this gets, no matter how much we improve over time, this is really going to be an important period where parents really need to know how to advocate for themselves and their young people. And so I think combining those conversations as much as we can is going to be really important.
Yeah, thank you, Marcus. So if we have 5 people on a panel, sounds like we should have at least one person from a school who's, you know, a parent coordinator or does something, who's responsible for making that work. A community schools coordinator, so maybe that's the same thing, I'm not sure. That, you know, but maybe those are 2 separate. Would be nice to have more than one school from more than one ward represented, I think. So maybe those are 2 different roles, a principal maybe and a community schools coordinator. A parent who can speak sort of just to the experience of being a parent navigating this and how they have managed it and sort of their best practices. And I should mention that what we had discussed, Zach and Darren and I, is really having this be focused on best practices. So it's not about pointing out what's not working, but rather like that's inevitable, because when you're talking about the hacks that you've come up with, or the practices that have really worked, you have to talk about sort of where the gaps were. So that'll come up naturally, and I think that's important too. It's just to acknowledge those, but not to have these focused on that. To have them really focused on sort of what is working, or what will make this work better, or what has made this work better, if that makes sense. Yeah. LAYC, that's a good idea. So, oh yeah, ESL. I should have thought of that. All right, so we have community schools, somebody else from a school, a parent, and maybe two more. SPED, absolutely. And ESL. That's it. Homeless. That's 6. That's too much. No, just kidding. Well, this is the thing. I think it is there's so much, and you can only have so many people on a panel and have a real conversation, right? We could do 2, but then there's also a lot of other topics. So, I mean, maybe we do have a cycle. I think cycles are great because, you come back to the same topic at another point in the school year, and it's a way of also sort of assessing how things are going, right? Because you're maybe even asking some of the same questions, revisiting some of the same issues, and seeing where we are 6 months from now. So I think that could be a really good strategy, actually, if this goes well, to have this be an ongoing sort of cycle where the 5 or 6 topics that we're doing cycle through, right? Yeah, I'm just reading Marcus's comment about focusing on general, or having a general panel and then one focused on most vulnerable student populations. Yeah, that probably makes sense. That, I guess the question is, do they follow each other? One, first we do the general and then we do the most vulnerable, or should we, I don't know. So I don't know if we can answer that right now, but I think it's a good idea. So maybe the second webinar is about meeting the needs of our most vulnerable families.
I think what else, if there are folks that we think already like would be good to have on the panel, we can ask them a little bit about, like, I don't know if you could do like a 5 or 10 minute screening call with them to ask what they're going to talk about, so that we can sort of ask them to target on certain things. So I was just looking over my notes, for instance, on minor, not that we have to use them, but like the thing that was so impressive to me was the number of parents they got to turn out for these different events. And the numbers were huge compared to what I've seen from some other schools. But they did a survey of parents. Like, they didn't just do sort of a general needs assessment. They actually did a survey of all the parents, and they ended up finding out that like the TB testing and fingerprinting was huge for families to do volunteering. But a legal aid clinic they brought for families to talk about like custody and child support payments and other sort of legal issues families had 27 parents show up. They did vision screening for 65 students, a school of about 300 kids. So that was significant. So I would be really interested in, and then they did this job training workshop for parents. And I think it would be really interesting to have Ms. Woodson talk a little bit about learning about parent needs and then responding to parent needs. That would be like if it were her, that was the thing I would suggest she talk about. So I wonder if you could do the same thing with some of the other folks you're targeting to say like, you know, gosh, this person's got a lot to say on special ed, or wow, this person seems pretty well versed in what's happening with the homeless population at their school.
Yeah. All right. So I've collected these ideas, and I think Zach and I need to go back and sort of figure out what makes the most sense in terms of the panel. I definitely think it would be good to have conversations with potential participants, so we can send, a invite and see if they're interested, and then follow up with them. Yeah. Okay. So I think another question is how more around engagement and logistics. And Jessica, you sort of touched on a little bit when you talked about getting lots of folks to come. And I think that's one of the questions that I have is like, how do you get more than the usual suspects to show up, and who do we want to show up, and how do we reach them? And one question I have actually is just, would it be possible to do some of these both, like have it virtual and also in person? You know what I mean? Like have it be an option for folks to come in person, because you can have gatherings now of up to, what is it, 50 now, as long as you set it up safely. And so I'm wondering, especially if we want to do one focused on hubs, or, one that, we could model, actually, this is what it could look like, not a learning hub, but just that, look, we're meeting in person and we're doing it safely. And it makes it more accessible to some folks, I think. I mean, in some ways, I think the virtual platform has made meetings and things more accessible, actually. But it just is a thought that maybe we want to try to do one of these in person as well. So I'm just throwing that out there. And I guess I'm just wondering, in terms of logistics and outreach, I would like to hear, I guess, from John Paul, just what some of the challenges you think we might meet, and how, like, as we're talking, are you thinking, how would we do this? How would we do that? For instance, when would these happen? Is it possible to do these outside of our regular public meetings? Because I don't think we can take up every public meeting with our panels, right? So could we do this the first of every month, for instance, and can staff be part of that? And if it's during regular work hours. So I guess I just had logistical questions about that.
Hear me?
Not so well.
I'm on headphones, so let me see if I can turn them up. Hold on. Hear me better now?
A little.
Yes? Okay. I will try to speak as loud as I sort of can. So the logistics piece is yes. I mean, we have staff available that can do these types of things, right? Both Caitlin Malayo and I, when we've done the lunchtime live series type things, we've certainly been able to put that together, and it does take work, right? And I think we probably could do one once a month. That would probably be about the limit, but we can certainly start with that, right? I think in terms of the, once we've identified the people who we want and the topic, the logistics piece is we're pretty good at now, so I don't think that's a huge issue. I still would have concerns related to an in-person thing at this point. because our numbers are still not good and they're still going up, and I am very uncomfortable with that, even if it is allowed to do 50 people. I would not want to find out later that we're a new hotspot for cases, right? Like that wouldn't be good.
Right.
But I do think one of the things that we could do is once we've done some of this and it's recorded or we have a way to broadcast it again, I think we can also provide additional support to individual members who want to do this for school populations or for smaller groups of parents or for PTAs at individual schools. Like we could put together a shorter presentation that then you could send or participate in a discussion with a larger parent group on a virtual call or something like that, that would extend the reach of it beyond what we would do for a single event.
So you're saying we could create something like a shorter version, an edited version of the actual meeting that we could share and maybe then have a conversation after it, or something like that. That's a good idea. Yeah. So that was the next question is like, what do we want to have come out of it? So that sounds good. That all sounds good, John Paul, actually. Another logistical question is around translation. And I know on Zoom, there's a feature where you can have simultaneous translation happening. And I think we talked about that for WebEx and that it's not possible. Is that true? That's not a feature.
Yeah, it's not a feature. It's not a feature for there. For when we're broadcasting through YouTube, though, once it's been there for a little while, you can get transcript or closed caption translation of that piece. So that can be some of it. I mean, I think it depends too on if we're doing. I would love, frankly, to do one of the series in Spanish, like from start to finish. I think that would be a huge shift in what the government has been doing. Um, I think that's going to be a lift to try to find the right people to do it. But I think it would also be really beneficial to parents to show them that we're trying to meet them where they are rather than asking them constantly to meet us where we are. I don't
I
know how
don't,
do.
yeah, no, I might have trouble finding folks for that.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I think it's an interesting idea. It's a good idea. So maybe maybe we're just going to do parent engagement. Maybe that's just what we're going to do.
I mean, honestly,
It's like
it,
it's the bottom line, right? It's where the rubber hits the
yeah.
road, kind of. Yeah,
And this is the other piece too, is that the state board has approval authority of parent engagement standards. So we can do this and say part of why we're doing this is to see what works and see what we think is the minimum that people need to be doing. Like
right.
or some even if it's just best practices that we're finding out and we're publishing in our annual report of saying, hey, this worked, this didn't, this worked, this did. I think that's also really important information that we're also taking out of from the logistics beyond just the learning of the issues that we're ahead of, right?
And couching it in the conversation that now more than ever, parents are becoming such a critical role in administering education that, now that knowing that we have this authority, there's absolutely no reason why we wouldn't be having this discussion right now.
Yeah. No, they are co-teachers. We are co-teachers. I am exhausted. It's one week in. I'm not gonna lie. And I have so many, privileges that I know a lot of folks don't. So I can only appreciate what people who don't have a second adult in the house and have more than one semi-self-sufficient child
And this is
are
and
going
that
through.
goes back
Yeah.
also to that goes back also to the parent video series that we're working on too, right? With the ombudsman and with other groups
Yeah.
of trying to get some of that information. I mean, I had a really great call this morning with the George Washington's School of Public Health. They've been working and they're under contract with OSSI and Department of Behavioral Health to work with establishing a community of practice around behavioral health throughout the district. And one of the things that they are not quite there yet on is parent engagement. And so what I suggested to them is, well, why don't you have some of your practitioners record some videos for us for our video series on how to, for some mindfulness exercises for kids or for parents. Like, this is how you do a behavioral, a mental health check. Like, this is how you do like a breathing exercise, or all of these things that, students are getting sometimes in their school buildings, but parents don't know how to necessarily do that, because they're not trained. And so, but I'm, yeah.
So I just want to back up for a second. I like the idea of doing a one of the webinars focused just on Spanish-speaking parents. I think, obviously, to me, that's worthwhile. I don't think it takes the place of actually offering translation, right? And not just for Spanish. Like, we have to be able to offer translation for anyone to participate who wants to participate. And so, John Paul, I'm wondering if we could use Zoom instead of WebEx, or okay, we can? All right, let's do that. Easy fix. So is that something we can do through the office? Oh, okay. Yay. It's simpler than we thought. Okay, so I haven't tried to use it yet, but I have read about it, that it is a feature. So you just need to pay for it and then figure out how to use it. I mean, you need a translator. But there's, like, I guess, a channel, that is like the language channel. And so you can have as many different languages being translated, sort of like mini UN situations. So kind of nice.
Yeah, the staff will do the investigating and have it ready to go.
Awesome. Okay. So let me just look at my list here and see if I'm forgetting anything here that I wanted to put out there to you. I think that was it. I mean, the only other things that I think we need to figure out is sort of the format and what we want to convey about our office in each of these webinars. So, obviously the main attraction is the panel and the Q&A that happens, the discussion that happens after it. But I also think this is an opportunity for the state board to, share what we do and why we're here. And if there was, maybe we want to create something that we show at the beginning of each webinar, maybe it's a video, or maybe there's, something that one of our members says in introduction, but that is very clear talking points about who we are, what we do, and why we're important. Because I think part of this is sort of raising our visibility, obviously, but also just, hopefully expanding our reach in terms of, families and or stakeholders in general who see us as an asset, right? As, a body that is helpful. So that's just something to think about that, we can all work on. Maybe we need to start a shared document. They haven't been so successful, those shared documents, but maybe what would be better is if, I don't know, is that something that staff should start and we kind of comment on, do you think? Or should Zach and I start it and share it with you guys? Just like, what do we want? Yes, John Paul's saying yes, we do it. Okay.
Yeah.
Sorry. No, that's okay. I mean, I think the only reason I thought maybe you would want to start it is because it is defining what it is we do, but I guess, we can do that too. For sure.
I was gonna ask John Paul, when is that recording gonna be done? Will it be done in time?
That's what Ruth is doing right now. So I'm hoping that we will have at least one 30-second spot that is ready of sort of what the state board is by the time we have this. And so, but the question for me is, like, if there's things that are not there that we need to add or change, then I would want your input on that. But yeah, I mean, I think for all things, it's always more helpful if I can get a lot of input from board members at the start of things, at the beginning of things, so that we know that we're doing what is intended from the beginning.
And I was going to say maybe it might be also helpful to I don't know if this is even going to be included in the clip. I presume not if it's 30 seconds, but maybe even having, you know, someone from the Ombudsman and Student Advocates Office to say, hey, here's what we do. We're a resource for parents and families, blah, blah, blah. And then maybe even have, you know, our student members come in and say something briefly. But
Yes.
Yeah, the spot that we're doing with WJLA does mention both the Ombudsman and Student Advocate. The longer one for
nice.
whatever the other news organization is that I don't, WUSA, um, has additional information as well, but we're absolutely mentioning both of the offices. Again, in 30 seconds, there's not a whole lot of time to go into things. So it's more, you know, it's very much a teaser and then go to our website for more information.
So maybe we need, we either need like a script of some kind or a show just for this. I mean, I know videos are time consuming and expensive to do well. So maybe it really is just, you know, whoever is hosting would know that these are like the points you want to hit. You can be natural and say, you know, things that are relevant to that particular meeting, but, you know, also just making sure to mention this is who we are, this is what we do. Our whole office is made up of these 3 independent offices, and we have a student council, and blah, blah. And, you know, we are here are our public meetings. So just really kind of an advertisement for us, right? So I think that we can come up with a little script for that. And if eventually we, you know, and maybe a clip from the video will make sense for that. So that was just a point I wanted to make. And then I think the only other thing is to talk about next steps in making this happen. So does anybody say before we move on? Okay. So I think we have agreed that this first one is going to be focused sort of generally on parent engagement, that it will target both educators and families in terms of content. And we have a list of potential participants. So I think the first step is for Zach and I to go through that list and choose 5 to maybe propose to all of you, or, you know, to send and just see if that makes sense to all of you, or if you have other thoughts. And we'll try to be like, think about, you know, covering several bases with the people we choose. So that's the first thing. And then, but if you have other folks, like, you know, Jessica's proposal to have the community and community schools coordinator is a great one. If there are other folks like that you think we should include, just email Zach and I directly. I think that's the best way to do it. And maybe do that by Monday, I think would be good. And then the other thing is to figure out when to do this, like to actually choose a date. And we were thinking we need at least 5 weeks to do this, like in terms of putting together and, you know, getting our participants on board, first of all, and then sending out an invite and giving people time to put it on their calendar and giving us time to plan, which puts us at mid-October, right? So maybe what we want to do now is sort of have a rolling date, you know, like every third whatever of the month, we have our webinars. Is that something we can do now, or is that not advisable? Or can we
I mean,
yeah.
one of the challenges that we have, right, is that weeks that we already have official board meetings are pretty busy.
Right.
And so we just need to make sure that we're planning around that. I mean, and that's why, you know, for instance, the social studies committee meets the second week, right? So I think because of the advanced planning for this, we'll be fine. We just need to, once we set a date, I think we need to try to keep to it as much as we can. And the problem with third week, right, is that means that in November that's Thanksgiving and in December that's Christmas. So
Wait,
in Hanukkah.
third
So-
week is our public meeting, I thought.
Right. So what I'm saying, the end of the months in the fall are difficult.
I get you. The
because
fourth
there's
week
lots
is
of
bad.
holidays.
Yeah.
So we need to figure out, like, if we're gonna do it, like, if we can try to do it the second week of October, which is sooner, right? I think that'll be better for us in the long run, even if the first one is a little bit cramped to get there. So if we could do it like the 15th of October, I think we would be better off. 15th or 16th, because that's a holiday week of Indigenous Peoples Day.
Mm-hmm.
So we just have to be cautious of when we're doing it, but like,
Yeah. Do people have a sense of days that are better for getting folks to tune in? I don't know. There's so much going on all the time, and I feel like Thursday is a day when a lot of stuff happens. I wonder if Friday would be better.
part of the challenge too is are we planning to do this during business hours? Or are we planning to do this during after business hours, right? Because a lot of the parents that we're going to want to be talking to are probably going to be working, and
Yeah.
so the likelihood is that they're not going to really be able to participate at 11 o'clock on a Thursday for any of these things. So if we're talking about doing an evening meeting, I think Thursday is probably better than Friday, but like you're saying, there's a lot of things going on, so.
And if they're not working, then they're probably facilitating online learning.
Well, I was gonna say there could be maybe there could be that little space between those things, like 4:30 or something. But yeah, I don't know. For people who have 9 to 5 jobs that they're still trying to do, I do think we have more flexibility for those of us who are working at home. Even if you used to have a 9 to 5 job, you can kind of, move those things around. So, I would throw out maybe like a 4 or 4:30 time. It's like after school, but before dinner. And that, I mean, as a parent, I will say that that's kind of that is the most appealing time for me. But I don't know. I mean, I know you're never going to get everyone, but I wonder if there's been a poll or anything on this, like what the best time is. Yeah. So maybe what we should do is just just try it. Like, let's maybe set the first one for Thursday, October, what was it, 14th? 15th. Thursday, October 15th at 4 p.m. And say, 4 to 5:30 p.m. And yeah, and then I think the other piece is, once we've sent out invitations to potential participants, we have a date, we have to come up with who makes the invite? John Paul, is that us or you guys?
It doesn't matter. I mean, I think
Okay.
I think it's probably better from you, but if it's a coordination thing, I'm happy to do that.
Zach does it. Zach does the invite. Just kidding. All right, so we need to create an invite. And then I think one of the other pieces of this that I'm hoping, or one of the outcomes that I'm hoping for, is that by engaging lots of different folks as participants, and again, I think that we should invite people, even if they're not panelists, to participate, as experts or as people who have insights, is that then we get their networks as well, right? Like we get them hopefully to send this out to their networks, and also they sort of see us as partners. So this is a way of sort of networking as well, I feel like, for the state board. And then I guess the other piece, obviously, the content. So we have, I think the introduction about the state board and why we're doing the topic we're doing. We have the panel, the Q&A, and then I think we need something at the end of every webinar to sort of capture something from participants, right? Like we want some kind of assessment from for how it went, what could be better, but also, I think you were saying this, Jessica, that the minor folks did like a survey where they were actually gathering more information. And I think that is a great opportunity to do just a quick, fast and easy survey with folks, 5 questions, on the topic about like, what do you need? What resources do you have? What do you need? What has been helpful? What hasn't been, just something like that. So that is something, that I think the role of this committee between webinars will be sort of coming up with topic specific introduction material and survey at the end material, right? And beyond that, I think maybe these kind of end up running themselves a little bit, right? Like, I think our lift is finding the participants, which honestly, I don't think will be hard. And then just coming up with that content. And then finally, the last thing I think is just figuring out what we want to create based on this. Like, are we creating a memo after each one, or is it kind of dependent on what we got? We could decide. That was a really amazing discussion, like actually little videos of that, like little excerpts would be really powerful, to send out or to use in different, when we meet with our constituents. Whereas another one might be less useful in that way. And we're really just kind of using the survey data to create something that informs a resolution or a memo or something. So I think that can remain fluid for now, but maybe what we decide is that we always have something that we're creating afterwards based on what we've heard. So no problem, right? Easy. Yes, like a 5-question survey, exactly. Something short. All the conventionalism is out of the window on the timing stuff. Right. Marcus's point about timing, I know. So I think we just have to figure out the timing. I think we have to, adjust if we need to and figure that out. So next steps for you guys is sending any other ideas for participants, and then just looking out for emails from Zach and I with, the request to review. I think that's it at this point. Because we will try to put together an invite for participants and for the actually we could delegate this, right? Yeah, we don't have to do everything. So will somebody volunteer actually to do the invite for the general public? And we'll do the one for the outreach. Yeah, Mary Center and Bria, absolutely.
I was gonna say, yeah, I mean, we're happy to work on the invite for the general public in terms of how that's gonna work. One thing that I would note that we really need to do first is a sort of summary of what the committee has decided to the full board, and then asking them for their suggestions as well to make sure that they're.
I forget about that. Yeah.
that they're okay with this too. Like we think it is a great idea, but we do have a couple other people that we should probably consult with.
Right. So that's the actual first step, is sending that off to the rest of the members, right? So I'll do that right after this meeting, is send that letter. And so what happens with that, John Paul? Like, do we need to actually get approval on that at the next meeting before we can go forward? Or can we get an okay over email?
as long as there's consensus and I feel like there's not like strong opposition by a, you know, large minority or majority of people, we're fine to move forward without.
What's a large minority? Like two?
Like if we have, if there are 4 people of the board that are in opposition to something, it's
I
challenging
getcha.
to get things done. Now,
Right.
that doesn't mean that, like, you know, we could, at that point, I would suggest that we have a vote on it and the 5 majority of this committee might decide to move forward with it. That's fine. But like, you know, I try to run by consensus as much as possible, right? It's much easier.
Yeah. But could we vote on it next week, or we would have to bring it to the September meeting if it goes to October meeting?
Yeah, it would have to be
Working.
in October. So I think we're fine though. I mean, I don't see anything here that anyone would object to. I mean, it's exactly what, you know, we've been talking about for 6 years in terms of engagement and
Wow.
getting people working, and like we've been working on these issues in various
Right.
ways, and so I don't see any problem with it. I just think, you know, just as a matter of course, we just need to make sure that they're aware of what's going on.
Okay. All right. So I'm sending that out. Assuming we get approval, then the next step is really just to sort of reach out to our potential partners and to flesh out some of these other things we talked about.
And Emily, we're sending that out today to the board, right?
Correct.
And just given the holiday, maybe if we give them until Tuesday or Wednesday, I don't see a world where people would object, but who knows? But just wanted to clarify on dates as I'm putting stuff on the calendar on my end.
Yes. And what I'll add to the email that I sent to them is just that we're proposing this for October 15th, and that then it would be the second, it's at the second Thursday of every month, right? Yeah. Okay. I think we can end early. I'm just really trying to suck up to you guys, so I hope you enjoy that 20 minutes that I just gave you. All right. So unless there's anything else, have a great weekend, y'all.
Enjoy your holiday
All
week.
right, y'all.
Bye.
Bye.